In the gleaming penthouse suite of the Harrington Tower, Maxwell Reed stands before floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan sprawled beneath him like a kingdom at his feet. His reflection stares back. Tailored Tom Ford suit, titanium watch worth more than most people's annual salary, and eyes that haven't truly smiled in years. At 42, Maxwell has everything money can buy and nothing his soul truly wants. "Mr. Reed, your 9 a.m. with Tokyo is ready on the line," his assistant's voice chirps through the intercom. Maxwell sighs, straightening his already perfect tie. "Tell them I'll be there in 3 minutes." Not 1 second before. Power plays, the small assertions of control that have become his signature in the business world. As CEO of Reed Luxury Hospitality Group, with 17 five-star hotels across 3 continents, Maxwell has built an empire on understanding what the wealthy desire before they know it themselves. Yet lately the champagne tastes like water, the applause sounds hollow, and sleep eludes him despite sheets that cost more than a month's rent in the very city he overlooks. The nightmares have been getting worse. Always the same. He's a child again, standing in the rain outside that building, watching through windows as families embrace children who aren't him. Then he's falling into nothing, until he wakes, gasping in his empty bed. "Mr. Reed?" The intercom again. They're waiting. The meeting drags on, projections, expansions, competitors circling like sharks. Maxwell maintains his veneer of icy confidence while inwardly counting the minutes until he can escape. These days, everything feels like an obligation. The charity galas, the model girlfriend he can barely remember why he's dating, even the business that once consumed him with passion. Hours later, he slips out of the building, dismissing his driver. "I'll walk," he says, craving something he can't name. Perhaps just the anonymity of being one face among millions for a few precious moments. The autumn air carries a chill that threatens rain. Maxwell strides purposefully, though he has nowhere particular to go. His phone buzzes incessantly. His assistant, his investment manager, his girlfriend wondering which restaurant he's taking her to tonight. He silences them all. The first drops of rain begin to fall as he passes a small, independently owned coffee shop, the kind his company would typically buy out and transform into something sleek and unrecognizable. Something about its warm glow pulls him inside, just as the sky opens up completely. The place is nearly empty. It's that odd hour between the morning rush and lunch crowd. Maxwell takes in the mismatched furniture, the chipped mugs, the handwritten menu board. It's everything his hotels are not: imperfect, authentic, warm. "Be right with you," calls a voice from behind the counter, where a man kneels, apparently cleaning up a spill. Maxwell takes a seat at a corner table, oddly comforted by the anonymity. Here, no one cares that he's Maxwell Reed. Here, he's just another customer seeking shelter from the rain. The man approaches, wiping his hands on a dish rag tucked into his apron. He's perhaps 30, with calloused hands and kind eyes that seem oddly familiar. "Sorry about that, what can I get you?" he asks, and something in his voice strikes Maxwell like a half-remembered song. "Just coffee. Black," Maxwell replies, studying the man's face. "You sure? Our house special is pretty famous around here. Cinnamon latte with homemade whipped cream. Sounds fancy, but tastes like comfort." Maxwell almost refuses out of habit. He doesn't do whipped cream or comfort, but finds himself nodding. "Fine, that." As the man turns away, Maxwell notices a small framed photograph behind the counter of a much younger version of the barista standing beside an elderly woman outside this very shop. Their smiles are identical, genuine in a way Maxwell can't remember ever feeling. "Terrible weather we're having," the barista says conversationally as he works. "Though my plants don't mind the rain. Got a little garden up on the roof. Nothing fancy, but it keeps me sane in the city." Maxwell makes a non-committal sound, unused to small talk without purpose. Yet he finds himself watching the man's methodical movements with interest. "I'm Elijah, by the way," the barista says, placing a mug before Maxwell. "Elijah Parker, but everyone calls me Eli." The name sends an unexpected jolt through Maxwell, though he can't place why. "Maxwell," he offers in return, deliberately omitting his last name. "Well, Maxwell, hope that warms you up." been making. That recipe for 15 years. Started when I was just a kid helping my grandma in this very spot. Maxwell takes a sip and pauses, genuinely surprised. The coffee is remarkable, complex but comforting, exactly as promised. It's good, he admits, the simple compliment feeling foreign on his tongue. Eli grins like Maxwell has just offered him gold rather than basic courtesy. Glad to hear it. Grandma would be pleased. She always said good food brings people together, no matter where they come from. As Eli moves to attend to another customer, Maxwell's phone buzzes again. His assistant, emergency Harrington deal falling apart. Asia Pacific investors threatening to pull out. Need you back now. Maxwell should leave immediately. This deal represents billions. Instead, he takes another sip of coffee, watching Eli interact with an elderly customer, helping her to a seat by the window with a patience rarely seen in New York City. The rain continues to pour as Maxwell finishes his coffee, leaving a $100 bill under the mug, a gesture that feels simultaneously generous and hollow. As he stands to leave, his eyes catch on a small bulletin board near the door, crowded with community announcements and photographs. One yellowed picture in particular stops him cold. It shows a group of children outside what appears to be an orphanage dated nearly 30 years ago. Though faded, one face is unmistakable. A younger version of Eli stands in the back row, but it's another face that makes Maxwell's hand tremble slightly. A small boy on the end, partially cropped from the frame, with eyes Maxwell sees in the mirror every day. All set? Eli's voice breaks through his trance. Hope we'll see you again. Maxwell turns, meeting Eli's gaze directly for the first time. Something passes between them, a strange current of recognition neither can possibly understand. Yes, Maxwell says, his voice unusually soft. I believe you will. As he steps back into the rain, Maxwell feels a peculiar sensation in his chest, as though something long dormant has begun to stir. Behind him, Eli watches his departure with an odd expression, unconsciously touching the faded scar on his wrist. A small, crescent-shaped mark, identical to one Maxwell Reed has carried since childhood. That night, as rain lashes against the penthouse windows, Maxwell finds himself unable to focus on the crisis at hand. The Harrington deal, his company's ambitious expansion into luxury wellness retreats, is unraveling due to investor concerns about market saturation. His executive team has been working through the night, sending him constant updates, but Maxwell's thoughts keep drifting back to that coffee shop and the unsettling photograph. Just an old picture, he mutters to himself, pouring a third glass of scotch. Means nothing. Yet his fingers are already typing Sunshine Children's Home New York 1990s into his search bar. The results yield little. The facility closed decades ago, most records lost in a fire. Just another underfunded orphanage that had housed unwanted children and then vanished from public memory. The phone rings. His COO, Victoria Sloan. Max, we need to discuss damage control. 3 more investors are wavering after hearing about Tokyo. I've drafted a statement, but find out everything you can about a coffee shop called Parker's in the East Village, Maxwell interrupts. Who owns it? Financial situation, property, value. A coffee shop? Max, we're hemorrhaging support on a billion-dollar deal and you're asking about... Just do it, Victoria. I need it by morning. He hangs up, ignoring her protests. It's impulsive, irrational, everything Maxwell Reed is not known for. For 20 years, he's built his reputation on calculated decisions and emotional detachment. Yet here he is, fixated on a barista and a faded photograph while his business empire faces its greatest challenge. Morning arrives with Victoria in his office, dark circles under her eyes and a tablet in hand. Your coffee shop, she says, voice clipped with barely concealed irritation. Owned by Elijah Parker, inherited from his grandmother Margaret Parker, who passed away last year. The business is barely staying afloat. Property taxes are 3 months overdue, and there's a predatory development company circling Cromwell. Enterprises, Maxwell frowns. Cromwell. Owen Cromwell's company? The same. Apparently they've been buying up that entire block. Parker's is the last holdout. Owen Cromwell. Maxwell's former business partner turned rival after an acrimonious split 5 years ago. The man has made it his mission to undermine Maxwell at every turn. What else? Maxwell asks, feigning casualness. Victoria swipes through her notes. Parker's personal history is sparse, raised by his grandmother from age 7 after being released from the foster system. No records of biological parents. Graduated community, college with a culinary arts degree, but turned down a promising apprenticeship to help his grandmother run the cafe. Volunteers weekly at a homeless shelter. No criminal record. Excellent credit despite financial struggles. Not exactly the kind of acquisition target we typically pursue. Maxwell barely hears the last part, his mind catching on the detail about foster care. What happened when he was 7? Why was he in the system? Victoria looks puzzled by his interest. I don't know, those records would be sealed. Max, what's going on? We have the Asian investors on the line in 20 minutes. He waves her off. Handle it. Tell them I'll double the profit projections with a new concept. I need to go out. Despite her protests, Maxwell is already heading for the elevator, instructing his driver to take him straight to the East Village. The morning rush is in full swing when Maxwell arrives at Parker's Coffee. He stands across the street watching. Eli moves with practiced efficiency, greeting regulars by name, remembering their orders, occasionally refusing payment from those who seem down on their luck. Maxwell enters, ignoring curious glances from the morning crowd. He waits until there's a lull before approaching the counter where Eli is wiping down the espresso machine. Back so soon? Eli smiles with genuine warmth. Must have been better coffee than I thought. The building that used to be on West 43rd, Maxwell says without preamble. Sunshine Children's Home. You lived there. The smile fades from Eli's face, replaced by wariness. How do you know that? The photograph on your bulletin board. Eli studies him for a long moment. Why do you care? A woman approaches the counter with an empty cup, and Eli holds up one finger, asking her to wait. I can't talk now, he tells Maxwell. We close at 3 today. Come back then if you want. Despite every business instinct screaming about the investor crisis waiting at his office, Maxwell nods. I'll be here. The hours crawl by. Maxwell attempts to work remotely, sending instructions to Victoria about the Harrington deal, but his mind keeps circling back to questions that have no logical place in his life. Why does he feel connected to a coffee shop owner he's just met? Why is a 30-year-old photograph haunting him? What is he hoping to discover? At precisely 3 o'clock, Maxwell returns to find Eli turning the open sign to closed. Through the window, he watches the barista methodically wiping down tables, seemingly talking to himself, or rather to the empty shop, as he works. Maxwell knocks and Eli glances up, hesitating before unlocking the door. I wasn't sure you'd really come back, Eli admits. The cafe feels different, empty, more intimate somehow. Maxwell notices details he missed before. The ceiling beams worn with age, photographs covering one wall showing the shop through different decades, children's drawings pinned behind the counter. You wanted to talk about Sunshine, Eli says, gesturing to a table. Not many people remember that place even existed. Maxwell takes a seat, suddenly unsure how to proceed. The photo on your board, I recognized it. Were you there too? Eli asks directly. You'd have been around my age, I guess. I was there, Maxwell admits, the words feeling strange in his mouth. He hasn't spoken of this to anyone in decades. Briefly, ages 4 to 6. Eli nods slowly. I was there from 5 until 7 when my grandmother found me. There was a mix-up with paperwork after my parents died. Took her years to track me down. Maxwell's throat tightens unexpectedly. You were lucky to have someone looking. It was, Eli agrees, though those 2 years felt like forever. He studies Maxwell's face. So why the interest? Most people who went through that place spend their lives trying to forget it. Maxwell finds himself uncharacteristically hesitant. I don't know. When I saw you yesterday, something seemed familiar. Eli's hand unconsciously moves to his left wrist, rubbing the crescent-shaped scar there. Maxwell's eyes follow the movement, his own hand mirroring the gesture. That scar, Maxwell says quietly, How did you get it? Eli looks down at his wrist, surprise crossing his features. This? I've had it as long as I can remember. Some of the older kids at Sunshine said I was born with it. Maxwell slowly pulls back his French cuff to reveal an identical mark on his own wrist. Eli stares, the color draining from his face. That's impossible. Perhaps, Maxwell agrees, his usual certainty nowhere to be found. Do you have any records from that time? Documentation about your birth parents? Eli shakes his head. Just my grandmother's stories. She said my parents were Daniel and Rebecca Parker. They died in a car accident when I was 5. And before that, you don't remember anything? Flashes sometimes, a big house with blue shutters, a dog named Charlie, a woman singing. Eli pauses. And a little boy who followed me everywhere. I always assumed he was an imaginary friend I created at the orphanage. Maxwell's heart pounds, uncomfortably in his chest. Was there anything else your grandmother kept? Photos, documents? There's a box of my grandfather's things in storage. Family papers, I think. I've never gone through it all. Eli hesitates. Look, this is crazy. Just because we have similar scars. I'll pay your property taxes, Maxwell interrupts, and I'll keep Cromwell Enterprises from buying this building. Eli's expression hardens. I don't need charity from a stranger. Not charity, an exchange. Let me see what's in that box. Why? What do you think you'll find? Maxwell stands abruptly, pulling out his business card, the first time he's revealed his full identity. That's who I am. Look me up if you want to verify. Eli takes the card, eyes widening as he reads it. Maxwell Reed, the hotel guy. What does someone like you want with old papers from a foster kid? Perhaps nothing, Maxwell says quietly. But I need to know. With that, he leaves, the bell above the door jingling softly. Outside, the late afternoon sun breaks through clouds, casting long shadows across the street. Maxwell looks back through the window to see Eli still standing there, holding the business card and wearing an expression that mirrors the confusion Maxwell feels. In his pocket, Maxwell's phone vibrates with urgent messages about the collapsing deal. For the first time in his career, he doesn't immediately reach for it. Instead, he touches the crescent-shaped scar on his wrist, the mark he spent a lifetime hiding beneath expensive watch bands and custom shirt cuffs, and wonders about a truth he never thought to question. Maxwell doesn't sleep that night. Instead, he sits in his home office surrounded by holographic projections of the failing Harrington deal. Financial models, competitor analyses, market forecasts, all ignored as he scrolls through adoption, records and historical archives for any mention of the Sunshine Children's Home. Dawn finds him bleary-eyed but determined. The photograph from Parker's coffee shop is now his phone's background image, the face of the small boy zoomed and enhanced. The resemblance to his own childhood photos is undeniable. His intercom buzzes. Mr. Reed, Miss Sloan is here. She says it's urgent. Maxwell barely looks up. Send her in. Victoria enters, impeccably dressed as always, but with tension radiating from every pore. Max, I've been calling all night. The investors have given us a 48-hour deadline to restructure the entire proposal, or they walk. I need you to find someone for me, Maxwell says, still staring at his screen. A former administrator from Sunshine Children's Home named. He checks his notes. Marianne Winters. She was the director there in the early 90s. Victoria's professional composure cracks. Are you having some kind of breakdown? Everything we've built is about to collapse, and you're obsessed with a coffee shop owner and an orphanage that closed 25 years ago. Maxwell finally looks at her, his expression unreadable. Do you remember when we started working together, Victoria? The Westbrook acquisition? Of course, it was a disaster waiting to happen, but you saw potential where no one else did. And why did it succeed? Victoria sighs. Because you trusted your instincts when all the data said otherwise. This is the same thing. It is not the same thing, she argues. That was business, this is personal, and Maxwell Reed doesn't do personal. That's been your strength all these years. Her words strike closer to the truth than she realizes. Maxwell has deliberately built his life around the absence of personal connection. No family, colleagues rather than friends, relationships that never progress beyond the superficial. Find Marianne Winters, he repeats, and tell the team to start developing a complete rebranding for the Harrington properties. Something about authenticity, community, local culture. We've been too generic, too corporate. He can see Victoria struggling between her loyalty and her confusion. Finally, she nods curtly. I'll find your orphanage director, but Max, whatever this is, resolve it quickly. We're running out of time. After she leaves, Maxwell calls his driver. Take me to the cafe again. When he arrives, Parker's coffee is bustling with the lunch crowd. Eli works alongside two younger employees, his movements graceful despite the rush. Maxwell waits outside, unwilling to cause a scene. Finally, Eli emerges with trash bags, stopping short when he sees Maxwell. Didn't expect you back so soon, Eli says cautiously. I need to see that box of your grandfather's things, Maxwell replies without preamble. Eli hesitates. I checked you out online last night. You're not just some hotel guy, you're a billionaire with a reputation for hostile takeovers. I'm not interested in your coffee shop. Then what are you? Interested in? Maxwell considers how much to reveal. I think we might have known each other, before Sunshine. Eli studies him, indecision clear on his face. Finally, he says, I close at 6 today. If you're serious about helping with Cromwell, I'll bring the box to my apartment above the shop. We can look through it together. The afternoon drags by in meetings Maxwell barely participates in. Victoria sends a message. Located, Marianne Winters, retired, living in Connecticut, will have contact information soon. At 6 o'clock sharp, Maxwell returns to find Eli locking up the cafe. Without speaking, Eli leads him through a side door and up a narrow staircase to a small but neat apartment. The walls are painted a cheerful yellow, plants flourish on every available surface, and the delicious aroma of something baking fills the air. Home, Eli says simply, gesturing around. Not what you're used to, I'm sure. Maxwell doesn't respond, his attention caught by a collection of framed photographs on one wall. Eli with his grandmother at various ages, both with identical warm smiles. Is that her? The woman who found you at Sunshine? Eli nods, a shadow of grief crossing his features. Margaret Parker, best person I've ever known. She passed last year. I'm sorry, Maxwell offers awkwardly, unused to expressing condolences. Thanks. Eli clears his throat. I'll get the box. Make yourself comfortable. Left alone, Maxwell examines the apartment more closely. It's the antithesis of his own sterile penthouse, lived in, warm, personal. Books fill mismatched shelves, a guitar leans in one corner, and handmade quilts drape over worn furniture. This is a home in the truest sense, not merely a place to sleep. Eli returns carrying a weathered cardboard box. Grandma kept this in her closet for years. I've never had the heart to go through it all. Together they sit at Eli's small kitchen table, the box between them. Eli opens it carefully as though handling sacred objects. Inside are bundles of letters, legal documents, and old photographs. After my parents' accident, my grandparents spent years trying to find me, Eli explains, sorting through papers. The system was a mess. Somehow I ended up classified as an abandoned child, rather than one with living relatives. Maxwell feels an uncomfortable tightness in his chest as Eli speaks. The foster system's failures are no surprise to him, having experienced them firsthand, but hearing about them in context with Eli's life makes them newly painful. Here, Eli says, pulling out a thick manila envelope. This is what Grandma said contained my original birth certificate and parents' death certificates. They open it together, carefully spreading documents across the table. Maxwell scans them with practiced efficiency, looking for inconsistencies or clues. Eli's birth certificate lists Daniel and Rebecca Parker as parents, with his date of birth matching what Maxwell would expect. Nothing unusual, Maxwell murmurs, disappointed. Did you really think there would be? Eli asks. Just because we have similar scars? Maxwell doesn't answer, continuing to sort through papers until he finds a faded newspaper clipping. The headline reads, "Local couple dies in tragic accident," with a small photo of a smiling man and woman, presumably Eli's parents. "May I see this?" Maxwell asks, already scanning the brief article. Most of it is standard reporting about a car accident, but one detail jumps out. The Parkers are survived by their 7-year-old son, Elijah, who is now in the care of child services pending location of relatives. Maxwell looks up, frowning. "Just one son, that's all it mentions." Eli nods, confused. "Of course, I was an only child." Maxwell pulls out his phone, scrolling through his own research. According to Sunshine's admissions records from that period, a set of brothers was admitted within the same week you arrived. Their parents had died in a car accident. "That doesn't mean anything," Eli argues. "There must have been other car accidents that year." The brothers were separated when the younger one was adopted quickly. The older boy remained until being reclaimed by a grandparent 2 years later. Maxwell meets Eli's eyes. "The dates align perfectly with your story." Eli shifts uncomfortably. "This is crazy talk. My grandparents would have told me if I had a brother." "Unless they didn't know," Maxwell suggests quietly. "If the system lost track of one child, why not two?" They continue searching, tension building as they find nothing conclusive. Finally, at the bottom of the box, Eli pulls out an old, leather-bound journal. "This was my grandmother's," he says softly. "I've never read it." Maxwell watches as Eli carefully opens it, the pages delicate with age. They begin skimming entries, most mundane accounts of daily life, until they reach an entry dated shortly after Eli's rescue from Sunshine. Eli reads aloud, his voice increasingly unsteady. "Finally brought our Elijah home today. He seems confused by everything, poor lamb. Keeps asking about the other boy. I think he must have made a friend at that awful place. When I showed him Daniel's childhood photos, he became very upset, saying they looked like his friend. Perhaps some other child there resembled our Daniel." Eli turns the page, continuing. "Elijah woke screaming again tonight. When I went to him, he was crying for Max. He says Max protected him at the home but was taken away. I've tried calling the administration to ask if Elijah had a special friend there who might visit, but they're maddeningly unhelpful. Perhaps this Max is another imaginary friend, though Elijah insists he was real." The journal slips from Eli's fingers, falling open to a page where a small amateur photograph has been taped. A child's drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands, one taller than the other, written in a childish scrawl across the top. "Me and Max." "It's not possible," Eli whispers, but his voice lacks conviction. Maxwell sits frozen, memories flooding back that he spent a lifetime suppressing. A blue house, the smell of his mother's perfume, a dog named Charlie, a little brother who followed him everywhere, whom he'd promised to protect. Then the accident, the confusion, strangers separating them despite his desperate protests. "I was adopted after 2 years at Sunshine," Maxwell says hoarsely. "The family changed my name from Maximilian Parker to Maxwell Reed, to match their tone. They never told me I had a brother. When I asked about my past, they said I'd been abandoned at birth. When I tried to talk about memories of before, they took me to therapists who convinced me those were just dreams." Eli stares at him, shock and disbelief warring on his face. "If that's true, why didn't my grandparents ever mention I had a brother? Maybe they tried to find records of me too, but couldn't. Maybe they thought it would be kinder not to tell you about a brother they couldn't locate." Maxwell rubs his temple. "Or maybe they did tell you, but you were too young to fully understand. And eventually it became a detail lost to time." The timer on Eli's oven beeps, making them both jump. Eli rises automatically to check on whatever's baking, his movements mechanical with shock. Maxwell remains at the table, surrounded by fragments of a past he never knew he had, when his phone vibrates. It's Victoria. "Found her. Marianne Winters. She'll meet with you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Says she remembers the Parker brothers clearly." He looks up to find Eli standing in the kitchen doorway, a complicated emotion on his face. "I need to know," Eli says simply. "So do I," Maxwell replies. Just then, Maxwell's phone rings, his executive team calling about the imminent collapse of the Harrington deal. As he reaches to silence it, his sleeve pulls back, revealing the crescent scar. Eli's eyes lock onto it, then rise to meet Maxwell's gaze. In that moment, something shifts between them, years of separation and difference falling away, to reveal a truth neither can deny any longer. Whatever paperwork might confirm, whatever Marianne Winters might tell them tomorrow, they both already know. The boy from the orphanage wasn't an imaginary friend. The brother Eli remembered wasn't a dream, and the child Maxwell had been forced to forget has been making coffee in the East Village all these years. The rain returns overnight, a steady downpour that mirrors the turbulence Maxwell feels as he stands before the modest Connecticut home of Marianne Winters. Beside him, Eli shifts nervously, collar turned up against the weather. "Ready?" Maxwell asks. Eli nods, though his expression suggests otherwise. "This woman could tell us we're both crazy, that none of this is real." She could, Maxwell acknowledges. But would that change what you already know? Before Eli can answer, the door opens to reveal an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a skeptical expression. "Mr. Reed, I presume, and this must be Elijah Parker. Come in before you both catch pneumonia." Marianne. Winter's living room is cluttered with memories, photographs, books, mementos from a life devoted to children who had no one else. She settles into a worn armchair, gesturing for them to sit on the sofa opposite. "When your assistant called, Mr. Reed, I wasn't surprised," she says bluntly. "I've followed your career over the years, always wondered if you'd remember eventually." Maxwell leans forward. "Then it's true." She studies them both, her gaze softening. "You look like your father, Maximilian. Both of you do. Daniel Parker was a good man, worked as an architect, designed homes for people who couldn't typically afford custom designs. Your mother, Rebecca, was a kindergarten teacher. They adored both of you." Eli's hands tremble slightly. "If you knew who Maxwell was all these years, why didn't you ever contact him? Or my grandparents?" Marianne sighs heavily. "By the time I realized what had happened, the adoption was finalized and sealed. The Reeds were powerful people who made it very clear they wanted no connection to their new son's past. They threatened legal action when I tried to explain about Elijah. And my grandparents," Eli presses, "why didn't you tell them about Max?" "I tried," she says simply. "I called them shortly after they found you, but they were suspicious, thought I might be trying to scam them somehow. Later, when I tried again, they'd changed their number. The system failed you both, and I was part of that system." She rises slowly, moving to a bookshelf where she retrieves a small cardboard box. "I kept these, hoping someday they'd find their way back to you. Inside are items from their shared childhood, crayon drawings signed by both boys, a small carved wooden dog that had been their father's handiwork, and most strikingly, a photograph of the entire Parker family. Daniel and Rebecca smiling broadly, 5-year-old Max with his arm protectively around 3-year-old Eli, the blue-shuttered house visible in the background. We lived on Maple Street in Burlington, Vermont," Marianne continues. "Your parents were driving back from a weekend anniversary trip when the accident happened. You boys were with a babysitter." Maxwell stares at the photograph, memories rushing back with such force he nearly gasps. "The dog in the picture, that was Charlie. Your father's retriever," Marianne confirms. "He went to live with an uncle of yours after the accident." Eli touches the photograph gently. "I remember this house, the blue shutters. Mom used to sing while she cooked. Dad would carry me on his shoulders." "And me," Maxwell adds softly. "You followed me everywhere. I was supposed to watch out for you. I promised, Dad." The three sit in silence for a moment, the weight of lost years pressing down on them all. "After the accident, you were both brought to Sunshine," Marianne explains. "It should have been temporary until your grandparents could be located, but paperwork was mishandled. Elijah's records correctly listed the Parker grandparents as next of kin, but Maximilian's paperwork somehow listed him as a ward of the state with no known relatives." "How could that happen?" Maxwell demands, anger surfacing through his shock. "Overworked. Caseworkers, budget cuts, computer systems that didn't communicate with each other," Marianne lists wearily. "I wish I could say it was unusual, but such mistakes were all too common, especially back then. By the time I discovered the error, The Reeds had already adopted Maximilian and changed his name. They were wealthy donors to the agency's board members. No one was willing to challenge them. Maxwell's jaw tightens. Memories of his adoptive parents flooding back. Cold, status-obsessed people who treated him more like an acquisition than a child. They knew, he says flatly. They must have known I had a brother, a living grandparent. Almost certainly, Marianne agrees sadly. But they wanted a certain kind of child from a clean slate. The story they told about finding you abandoned was designed to make you dependent on their narrative. Eli watches Maxwell's face harden with anger. When my grandparents found me, they spent years trying to help me recover from the separation trauma. They thought I was talking about an imaginary friend when I mentioned you. Eventually, I stopped talking about you at all. And I was trained to forget you existed, Maxwell says bitterly. The Reeds hired therapists to help me overcome my delusions about having a family before them. After a while, it seemed easier to believe them than to keep fighting. A heavy silence falls between them. Outside, the rain continues its steady rhythm against the windows, marking time as two brothers reckon with decades of loss. What happens now? Eli finally asks, looking between Marianne and Maxwell. Marianne shakes her head gently. That's not for me to say. You're both grown men. I've held on to these memories for you, but what you do with them is your choice. Maxwell's phone vibrates, insistently in his pocket. The business empire that has defined his adult life demanding attention. He silences it without looking. I have questions about our parents, he says instead. Everything, who they were, how they met, what they loved. For the next 2 hours, Marianne shares everything she remembers about Daniel and Rebecca Parker. Their college romance, their dreams of raising a family in Vermont, Daniel's passion for designing affordable housing, Rebecca's gift for working with children. With each detail, the brothers' forgotten childhood comes into sharper focus. As they prepare to leave, Marianne places a hand on each of their arms. Your parents would be proud of the men you've become, despite everything. Elijah's kindness, Maxwell's determination, those are qualities you inherited from them. On the drive back to the city, silence reigns. Both men gaze out at the rain-soaked landscape, processing the impossible truth they've discovered. The photograph from Marianne sits between them, tangible proof of the family they once were. Finally, as they approach Manhattan, Maxwell speaks. I'm buying your building. Eli turns to him, startled. What? The cafe. The building. I'll buy it. Transfer ownership to you. Cromwell won't be able to touch it. I don't want your charity, Eli says, the same stubborn pride that Maxwell recognizes in himself. It's not charity, Maxwell replies evenly. It's 25 years of birthday presents I never got to give my little brother. The simple statement, my little brother, hangs in the air between them, profound in its acceptance of their shared truth. I have a board meeting tomorrow morning, Maxwell continues. The Harrington deal is collapsing, and the company cares in crisis. I should care more than I do right now. Eli studies him. What will you tell them? I don't know yet. Maxwell's hands tighten on the steering wheel. Everything I've built has been about proving something. To the Reeds, to the world, to myself. That I was worth choosing, worth keeping. And now? Maxwell glances at the photograph again. Now I know that once upon a time I was already loved, just as I was. They pull up outside Parker's Coffee as evening falls. Through the windows they can see the warm lights still on, one of Eli's employees closing up. Come up for dinner, Eli says suddenly. Nothing fancy, but I made stew. This morning before we left, Grandma's recipe. The invitation hangs between them, simple yet monumental. I'd like that, Maxwell says, and for the first time in longer than he can remember, the smile that crosses his face reaches his eyes. Upstairs in Eli's apartment, the brothers move, awkwardly around each other. The intimacy of shared DNA at odds with the strangeness of their adult selves. Eli heats the stew while Maxwell sets the table, the domesticity of the scene surreal after the revelations of the day. Over dinner, they begin the complex process of becoming reacquainted, sharing the broad strokes of the lives they've lived, apart, Eli describes growing up with his grandparents in their small apartment above the cafe, learning to bake from his grandmother, the community they built in this neighborhood. Maxwell recounts his cold upbringing with the Reeds, his escape to boarding school, his driven climb through the business world. Were they ever kind to you? Eli asks. The Reeds. Maxwell considers the question honestly. They gave me opportunities, education, connections. But warmth? No. I was an accessory, not a son. When I turned 18, I legally changed my middle name to Parker. I told them it was to honor a mentor, but somehow, some part of me remembered it was mine. Maxwell Parker Reed, Eli says softly. You kept a piece of us without even knowing why. As the evening grows late, Maxwell helps Eli wash dishes, an activity so mundane yet so foreign to his usual existence that it feels almost sacred. His phone has been vibrating steadily. Victoria, board members, lawyers, all demanding decisions about the Harrington crisis. He continues to ignore them. You should probably answer those, Eli suggests, noticing the phone lighting up again. Tomorrow, Maxwell says, some things are more important. As he prepares to leave, Maxwell pauses at the door. I'd like to come to the cafe tomorrow, after my meeting. There's something I need to ask you. Eli nods. I'll be there. That night, in his penthouse overlooking the city, Maxwell stands at the windows where just days ago he'd felt utterly alone. Now the emptiness of his luxurious surroundings strikes him more profoundly than ever. He takes out the family photograph, propping it against a lamp where he can see it from his bed. For the first time in decades, he sleeps without nightmares. Morning. Arrives with a clarity Maxwell hasn't experienced in years. The board meeting awaits, 17 faces that expect him to have a miracle solution for the Harrington disaster. For the first time in his career, Maxwell finds himself considering what truly matters. Victoria meets him outside the conference room, relief visible on her face. Thank God you're here, I've been calling all night. I know, I had something personal to handle. She blinks, clearly thrown by the concept of Maxwell Reed having anything personal. Well, they're waiting. The projections are worse than we thought. 3 more investors pulled out overnight. Maxwell straightens his tie, a gesture of habit rather than necessity. I'm changing the plan. To what? You'll see. He strides into the room, immediately commanding attention as he always has. The board members watch warily as he takes his place at the head of the table. Their expressions range from concern to barely concealed panic. The Harrington properties, Maxwell begins without preamble. 17 luxury wellness retreats across 3 continents, a $5 billion investment, and a fundamentally flawed concept. Murmurs of alarm ripple through the room. This is not the confident reassurance they were expecting. We've been approaching hospitality all wrong, Maxwell continues, creating identikit luxury experiences that could be anywhere, that mean nothing. No connection to local communities, no authentic experiences, no soul. Harrison Wells, the oldest board member, clears his throat. With all due respect, Maxwell, that approach has built this company into what it is today. Yes, Maxwell agrees, and it's reached its limit. The Harrington deal is collapsing, not because our projections were wrong, but because what we're offering isn't what people truly want anymore. He pulls up a presentation none of them have seen before, concepts for a complete reimagining of the Reed hospitality brand, properties that celebrate their locations rather than imposing standardized luxury, hotels that engage with local artisans, farmers, and cultural traditions, experiences that connect rather than isolate. This isn't just about saving the Harrington deal, Maxwell explains. It's about evolving our entire approach. I'm proposing we start with a pilot project, transforming one of our existing properties as proof of concept. Victoria studies him with growing curiosity. Which property? The Manhattan Reed, our flagship. The board erupts in protests. The Manhattan Reed is their crown jewel, a symbol of old-world luxury and exclusivity. You want to risk our most profitable property on an untested concept? Harrison demands. I want to make it meaningful, Maxwell counters. When was the last time any of you actually enjoyed staying at one of our hotels, not appreciated the thread count or the rare whiskey selection, but genuinely felt something? The E2I uncomfortable silence that follows tells him everything. I'm bringing in a consultant, Maxwell continues, someone with an authentic vision of hospitality that we've lost sight of in our pursuit of luxury for its own sake. And who is this visionary? Harrison asks skeptically. Maxwell allows himself a small smile. You'll meet him soon. For now, I need the board's provisional approval to begin planning the Manhattan Reed transformation. After tense debate, they agree, not out of conviction, but out of desperation. The Harrington deal is failing, and they have no better options. And if the meeting concludes, Victoria follows Maxwell to his office. That was unexpected, but necessary, he replies, gathering his coat. I'm going out. Cancel my meetings for the rest of the day. Maxwell, she says, blocking his path slightly. What's going on with you? First the orphanage research, now this complete change in direction. Is everything all right? He considers the question seriously. For the first time in a very long time, Victoria, I think it might be. Across town, Eli opens Parker's coffee to a crowd of regulars. As he steams milk and pulls espresso shots, his mind keeps returning to the impossible truth discovered yesterday. A brother, a past. Parents he can now remember more clearly with each passing hour. When the morning rush subsides, he retreats to the kitchen to begin preparing pastries for the afternoon. The rhythmic work of kneading dough centers him, a meditation, handed down from his grandmother. The cafe has always been his sanctuary, but today it feels different, like part of a larger story he's only beginning to understand. The bell above the door chimes, and Eli glances up to see an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit entering. Something about his confident swagger sets Eli on edge immediately. Good morning, the man says, approaching the counter with a practiced smile. Are you the owner? I am, Eli confirms cautiously. Elijah Parker. Owen Cromwell. The man extends his hand. I believe my company has been in contact with you about acquiring this property. Eli's grip on the counter tightens. Your letters have gone unanswered for a reason, Mr. Cromwell. The cafe isn't for sale. Cromwell's smile doesn't waver. I understand your attachment to this place. Family business, sentimental value, all that, which is why I've come personally to improve my offer. He slides a folder across the counter. Take a look. Despite himself, Eli opens it. The figure on the purchase agreement makes his breath catch. 5 times what the building is worth. That's generous, he admits, but still not interested. Cromwell's expression hardens slightly. Mr. Parker, I don't think you understand your situation. Your property taxes are in arrears. The building needs significant repairs to meet updated code requirements. The bank is reviewing your business loan. Frankly, you're drowning. The accuracy of the assessment stings. Since his grandmother's passing, Eli has been struggling to keep the cafe afloat, working 18-hour days and still barely making ends meet. How do you know about my loan? He asks sharply. Cromwell shrugs. I make it my business to know. Everything about properties I intend to acquire. This block is the final piece in a development that will revitalize this neighborhood. You mean gentrify it beyond recognition? Eli counters. Turn places like this into chain stores and luxury condos no one who actually lives here can afford. Progress is inevitable, Mr. Parker. You can benefit from it or be crushed by it. Your choice. Cromwell taps the folder. This offer expires at the end of the week. The bell chimes again and both men turn to see Maxwell entering the cafe. His expression darkens immediately upon seeing Cromwell. Owen, he says coldly. What a coincidence. Cromwell's surprise quickly transforms into amusement. Maxwell Reed, don't tell me you're slumming it in the East Village these days. Actually, Maxwell says, moving to stand beside Eli at the counter, I'm visiting my brother. The simple statement lands like a thunderclap in the quiet cafe. Cromwell's smug expression falters as he looks between the two men, noting the similarities he'd missed before. Brother? He repeats incredulously. Since when do you have a brother? Since birth, Maxwell replies evenly, though we've only recently reconnected. Family circumstances, you understand. Cromwell recovers quickly, shrewd mind recalculating. Well, isn't that touching and convenient, given my interest in this property? A property that isn't for sale, Eli reiterates. Perhaps not to me, Cromwell concedes, gathering his folder, but I wonder if your newfound brother has mentioned his own history with this neighborhood. The 3 blocks of affordable housing he demolished for his boutique hotel last year, the community center that mysteriously lost its lease. Eli glances at Maxwell, whose expression remains impassive. Reed Hospitality has a particular approach to revitalization, Cromwell continues. Not so different from mine, really. We just operate at different price points. That's enough, Owen, Maxwell says quietly. Is it? Have you told your brother about the bidding war we had over the Sullivan Street properties? About the residents you evicted with 30 days' notice? Each accusation lands like a blow. Eli's expression shifts from confusion to growing dismay. I think you should leave, Maxwell tells Cromwell. Gladly. Cromwell adjusts his tie with a satisfied smile. My offer stands until Friday, Mr. Parker. Think carefully about who you trust. At the door, he turns back. Oh, and Maxwell, the Harrington investors are calling me now. Funny how quickly loyalty shifts in this business. After he leaves, silence stretches between the brothers. Maxwell can see the questions and doubt in Eli's eyes. Is it true? Eli finally asks. What he said about the evictions? Maxwell doesn't flinch from the question. Yes, the Sullivan Street project happened exactly as he described. And the community center. Also true. I didn't personally handle those negotiations, but I approved them. Eli's disappointment is palpable. So you're really no different from him. Just another rich guy bulldozing whatever gets in the way of more profit. The accusation stings precisely because Maxwell can't deny its fundamental truth. Until very recently, he would have viewed Parker's Coffee exactly as Cromwell does. An undervalued asset to be acquired and transformed into something more profitable. I can't change what I've done, Maxwell says carefully, but I can change what I do going forward. Why should I believe that? Eli challenges. Just because we share DNA? Because we had the same parents 25 years ago? That doesn't make us family, Max. Not really. The use of the childhood, nickname Max, catches them both by surprise. It slips out unbidden, a ghost from their shared past. Maxwell reaches into his briefcase and pulls out a folder of his own. This is why I came today, after the board meeting. Eli takes it warily, opening to find architectural renderings of a completely reimagined Manhattan Reed Hotel. Where the current property is cold marble and generic luxury, these plans show warm woods, community spaces, and most surprisingly, a cafe and bakery prominently featured in the lobby. I don't understand, Eli says. I'm transforming our flagship hotel, Maxwell explains, away from soulless luxury towards something authentic. And I want you to run the culinary program, not just the cafe, all of it. Your vision, your approach to food and hospitality. Eli stares at him in disbelief. I don't have any experience running restaurant operations at that scale. But you understand what matters, Maxwell insists. The way food connects people, creates memories, feels like home. That's what's been missing. And if I say no, Maxwell accepts the question without offense. Then I'll find someone else, though no one with your particular understanding of what I'm trying to create. Either way, I'll still buy this building and sign it over to you, no strings attached. Why would you do that? Because Cromwell was right about one thing. This cafe can't survive much longer as things stand. The taxes, the repairs, the loan. You're fighting a losing battle, Eli. Let me help you win it. Eli closes the folder, his expression troubled. I need time to think. Of course, Maxwell agrees. But there's one more thing. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small velvet box. Marianne dropped this off at my hotel this morning. She found it with our parents' effects. Inside is a pair of matching cufflinks, simple silver squares with a distinctive pattern of lines that form a subtle P dads, Maxwell explains. One for each of us, apparently. A Parker family tradition when sons come of age. Eli touches one gently. I can't take this right now, not until I figure out how I feel about everything. Maxwell nods, understanding. "I'll hold on to them, for whenever you're ready." As he prepares to leave, the cafe door opens again, this time admitting Victoria, who looks somewhat out of place in her designer suit. "Max, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's urgent. Owen Cromwell is calling an emergency meeting with our Asian investors. He's making a play for the entire company." Maxwell should feel panic at this news, his life's work potentially slipping away. Instead, he feels a strange clarity. "Tell them I'll be there within the hour," he tells Victoria, who nods and steps outside to make calls. "Your empire's in danger," Eli says quietly. "You should go." "I will, but first I need you to know something." Maxwell meets his brother's eyes directly. "Whatever you decide about my offer, whatever happens with Cromwell or the company, finding you has changed everything. The person I've been, the life I've built, it was all based on a fiction. That I was alone. That I needed to prove my worth through wealth and power. And now I know that the most valuable thing I ever had was a little brother who thought I hung the moon." Maxwell's voice holds a rare vulnerability. Whether or not we find a way forward from here, that truth matters. With that, he leaves, stepping back into the world of high-stakes business that has defined him for so long. But as Victoria briefs him on Cromwell's latest maneuvers, Maxwell feels fundamentally altered, as though the ground beneath his feet has shifted, revealing a new landscape of possibility. Back in the cafe, Eli stands motionless, holding the folder with Maxwell's proposal. The bell above the door chimes as a regular customer enters, pulling him back to the present moment, to the life he's known. But for the first time, he allows himself to imagine a different future, one that honors his past while embracing new possibilities. On the counter sits the Parker cufflinks, which Maxwell left behind despite his words. Eli picks up one, running his thumb over the subtle P design, feeling the weight of inheritance, of belonging, of choice. 1 year later, on a crisp autumn evening, the Manhattan Reed Hotel glows with warm light and buzzes with anticipation. Gone is the austere marble lobby, with its imposing check-in desks and sterile atmosphere. In its place stands a space that feels more like a welcoming living room. Wooden floors salvaged from an upstate barn, comfortable seating arranged for conversation, and walls adorned with works by local artists. At the heart of this transformation is Parker's, not a mere hotel restaurant, but a true gathering place where the boundaries between guests and neighbors have deliberately blurred. The aroma of freshly baked bread and slow-simmered sauces permeates the air, drawing people in from the street. Behind the scenes, Eli moves with calm authority through the kitchen, tasting sauces, checking preparations, guiding his team with the same gentle firmness his grandmother once used with him. His chef's coat bears a subtle embroidered P on the breast pocket, the same stylized letter from his father's cufflinks. 5 minutes until the ceremony, Chef Parker, his sous chef, reminds him. Eli nods, removing his apron and straightening his collar. In the staff bathroom, he takes a moment to collect himself, studying his reflection. The past year has changed him. There's a confidence in his posture that wasn't there before, a certainty in his eyes. His grandmother would hardly recognize the shy cafe owner who once struggled to make payroll. The journey to this moment had not been simple or straightforward. After Maxwell's revelation about their shared past and his offer of partnership, Eli had spent weeks in turmoil, torn between suspicion of Maxwell's corporate world and the undeniable pull of their newfound connection. What finally convinced him wasn't Maxwell's business proposition, but rather what happened 3 days after Cromwell's visit to the cafe. Eli had arrived at Parker's Coffee that morning to find Maxwell waiting outside, not in his usual bespoke suit, but in jeans and a work shirt, sleeves rolled up. "What are you doing here?" Eli had asked, surprised by both Maxwell's presence and his attire. "You mentioned the plumbing in the apartment needs fixing," Maxwell had replied simply. "I thought I'd help. I was an engineering major before business school." "Don't you have a company to save from Cromwell's takeover?" "I do. Victoria's handling the preliminary negotiations today. I'll join later." That day they had worked side by side, fixing not just the plumbing but a host of small repairs the old building desperately needed. Maxwell had been surprisingly competent with tools, explaining that their father had been the same way, meticulous about maintaining their home himself rather than hiring others. As evening fell, covered in dust and grime, they'd sat on Eli's small balcony sharing beers, and for the first time, truly talking. Not about business propositions or the past, but about who they were now, their likes and dislikes, their dreams and disappointments. "Why are you really here today?" Eli had finally asked. "And don't say it's about the plumbing." Maxwell had considered the question with uncharacteristic openness. "Because I want to know my brother, not as a business partner or a project to fix, but as the person you've become." That honest answer had marked the beginning of their real relationship, not defined by their lost childhood or Maxwell's wealth, but by the men they were now choosing to be. In the weeks that followed, as Cromwell's attempt to seize control of Reed Hospitality played out in boardrooms and financial papers, Maxwell and Eli had begun a careful dance of reacquaintance. Small steps, Sunday dinners, occasional phone calls, gradual confidence building. Eli had visited the Manhattan Reed, walking its cold corridors and sterile rooms with growing understanding of Maxwell's vision for transformation. Maxwell had spent time at Parker's Coffee, observing how Eli created not just food but community, remembering customers' names, their children's achievements, their struggles and celebrations. The turning point came when Eli suggested bringing his staff to cook dinner for the residents of a transitional housing program where he volunteered. To his surprise, Maxwell had not only agreed, but rolled up his sleeves alongside them, serving meals and listening to residents' stories with genuine interest. Watching his brother that night, awkward but earnest in his attempts to connect with people whose lives bore no resemblance to his privileged existence, Eli had finally seen the truth. Maxwell wasn't just trying to save his company with a convenient rebranding. He was trying to save himself from the emptiness of the life he'd built. Now, a year later, Eli straightens his tie and exits the bathroom, making his way through the busy kitchen toward the main dining room where tonight's ceremony will take place. The transformation of the Manhattan Reed has exceeded everyone's expectations, becoming not just a financial success but a new model for the entire Reed Hospitality Group. In the dining room, elegantly set tables surround a small stage. Prominently displayed near the entrance is a framed photograph, their parents, Daniel and Rebecca Parker, standing proudly outside their blue-shuttered Vermont home, their young sons between them. Maxwell stands at the center of a group of investors, his manner confident yet markedly different from his former cold authority. He catches Eli's eye across the room and excuses himself, making his way over. "Nervous?" Maxwell asks, adjusting his own tie, a casual gesture of solidarity. "A little," Eli admits. "I'm more comfortable in the kitchen than accepting awards." "You deserve this recognition. What you've created here is extraordinary." The James Beard Foundation's Innovation in Hospitality Award had come as a surprise to everyone except Maxwell, who had witnessed firsthand how Eli's vision had transformed not just the Manhattan Reed, but the company's entire approach to hospitality. As the ceremony begins, Eli finds himself scanning the crowd. Alongside industry luminaries and hotel executives sit the true heart of this success, staff from the original Parker's Coffee, regular customers who followed Eli to his new venture, volunteers from the community programs the hotel now sponsors. Victoria Sloan, still Maxwell's right hand, but now her true believer in their new direction, takes the stage to introduce the foundation's representative. "A year ago," she begins, "when Maxwell Reed announced his plan to transform our flagship property into what he called a place of authentic connection. Many of us thought he'd lost his mind." Appreciative laughter ripples through the crowd. The Harrington deal was collapsing. Owen Cromwell was circling, and suddenly our CEO was talking about community gardens and local artisan partnerships. Her gaze finds Maxwell and Eli, standing side by side near the kitchen entrance. What we didn't understand then was that Reed Hospitality wasn't just changing its business model, its leadership was undergoing a profound personal transformation. As the foundation representative takes over to present the award, Maxwell leans closer to Eli. Do you remember that first cup of coffee you made me? At the old shop? Eli nods. Cinnamon latte with homemade whipped cream. You said it was good. High praise from the great Maxwell Reed. It was the first thing I'd tasted in years that felt like it had been made by human hands, with care. Maxwell's voice holds rare emotion. That's what we've brought back, you and I. Not just to this hotel, but to each other's lives. When Eli's name is called, the applause is thunderous. As he accepts the award, he finds himself searching not for practiced remarks, but for the simple truth of this moment. This recognition belongs to many people, he begins, to my team, who took a leap of faith following a cafe owner into a five-star hotel, to the community partnerships that have made our food program not just delicious, but meaningful, to my grandmother Margaret, who taught me that hospitality is about making people feel not just served, but seen. He pauses, finding Maxwell in the crowd, and to my brother, who had the courage to question everything he'd built and ask if there might be a better way. After the ceremony, as guests mingle and celebrate, Owen Cromwell makes an unexpected appearance. His development company has struggled. Since failing to acquire Reed Hospitality, his reputation damaged by the aggressive tactics exposed during the attempted takeover. Quite the victory lap you two are taking, he observes, glass of champagne in hand. I have to admit I didn't see this coming. Neither did we, Maxwell replies without hostility. Life has a way of surprising you. Cromwell studies them, calculation evident in his expression. You know, I'm developing a new concept for boutique. Hotels myself. Perhaps we could discuss a potential collaboration. Eli and Maxwell exchange a glance, silent communication that has become second nature over the past year. I think we're good, Eli responds simply. But there's a community development meeting next week about affordable housing initiatives in the East Village. You'd be welcome to join us there. Cromwell's smile tightens. Still idealists, I see. Realists, Maxwell corrects. We've just redefined what success looks like. After Cromwell departs, the brothers find themselves on the hotel's rooftop garden, Eli's pride and joy, where he grows herbs and vegetables for the restaurant. The Manhattan skyline glitters around them, beautiful but no longer the landscape of isolation it once represented to Maxwell. I had a call from Burlington yesterday, Maxwell says, leaning against the railing. The Historical Society there has finished restoring Dad's architectural drawings. They want to display them in the town hall. We should go, Eli suggests. See the Blue House again. I've been thinking about that, actually. Maxwell seems uncharacteristically hesitant. The property is available. I've had my real estate team looking into it. Eli raises an eyebrow. Planning another hotel? No. Maxwell smiles slightly. A home. Maybe a place where we could both go sometimes, to remember, to connect with who we were before everything happened. The suggestion hangs in the air between them. Not a business proposition, but something far more personal. I'd like that, Eli says finally, though I'm keeping my apartment above the original cafe too. Of course, some places hold too much of us to let go. Maxwell straightens, checking his watch. We should get back. Your dessert presentation is in 15 minutes. As they turn to leave, Eli pauses. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been working that morning? If you hadn't come in for coffee during that rainstorm? Sometimes, Maxwell admits. But then I remember what Dad used to say. What was that? Eli asks, curious about this memory he doesn't share. The universe bends toward healing, Maxwell quotes. He'd say it when his building projects faced obstacles, that if something was meant to be whole, all paths would eventually lead toward restoration. Below them, the transformed Manhattan, Reed Hotel hums with life and conversation. Inside, staff who once operated in rigid hierarchy now work as a genuine team. In the dining room, hotel guests mingle with local residents at community tables designed for sharing. In the kitchen, culinary students from underserved neighborhoods learn alongside veteran chefs. And throughout it all, evidence of the Parker legacy, not in ostentatious displays of family names, but in the fundamental philosophy that has reshaped everything. That true value lies not in exclusivity but in connection, not in perfection but in authenticity. As they rejoin the celebration, the brothers move with the easy synchronicity of those who have found their way back to each other across an impossible distance. Different in many ways. Eli still preferring casual clothes to Maxwell's tailored suits. Maxwell still more reserved than Eli's natural warmth, yet undeniably connected by more than just shared DNA. Later that night, after the guests have departed and the staff has cleaned up, the brothers sit alone in the empty restaurant. On the table between them sit their father's cufflinks, one worn by each brother throughout the evening. "To Mom and Dad," Maxwell says, raising his glass in a quiet toast. "To finding what was lost," Eli adds. Their glasses clink in the silence of the restaurant, the sound echoing like a bell marking not an ending but a continuation of a story interrupted decades ago and now resuming with chapters yet to be written. Outside, the city continues its relentless pace. Inside, two brothers who once shared nothing but a forgotten past have built something neither could have created alone. A place of belonging not just for themselves, but for all who enter. Not perfect, but authentic. Not finished, but healing. Just like them.